Welcome back to the Unseen podcast, a podcast dedicated to missing people, unresolved cases, and UK true crime. Today we are going to be discussing the disappearance of Andrew Elphick in Surrey in 1991. Andrew's story is both sad and mysterious, and the circumstances around his disappearance not only confused his friends and family, but also the police who were investigating it. For this episode, I have used information from several contemporary sources, such as a Guardian article in 1994, and I have also used a Crime Watch reconstruction that was carried out at the time to discuss the timeline leading up to Andrew's disappearance. As always, this episode contains descriptions that some listeners may find distressing, so listener discretion is advised. The village of Normandy is located in the borough of Guildford in Surrey. It's a small village which had less than 3,000 residents listed in the 2011 census. The surrounding areas of the South Downs and the Surrey area of outstanding beauty make it a picturesque place to live, while the connections to other larger cities mean that its residents can easily travel around. Normandy is close to the A323 Guildford to Aldershot road, and the towns of Aldershot and Woking are less than 10 miles away. London is only 36 miles away. It was a well-connected place to live, and it was here that 21-year-old Andrew Elphick lived in 1991. Andrew worked as a relief manager for the men's suit company Moss Bros and was living with one of his friends. It's reported that Andrew's mother had died when he was younger, and his father worked abroad. Speaking on a Crime Watch reconstruction in 1999, Andrew's brother Robert described him as an outgoing and sociable man who loved going out, seeing his friends and setting himself goals. He explained that Andrew wanted the best and was always looking for a new way to make money. He stated that his brother took a lot of pride in himself and his car, and he liked to keep fit. Everyone that knew Andrew knew that he was fun-loving and exciting to spend time with, but they also knew he was serious about getting on in life. On the 24th of August 1991, a silver Vauxhall Nova GTE Saloon was spotted in the area of Slough. This ordinarily would not stand out to members of the public as it was parked on a housing estate, however it was the way in which it was left that attracted attention. It was noticed that the car had been parked up, but the keys had been left in the ignition. The sunroof had also been left open. This was of course unusual, and it was reported to the police. The registration plate was examined and was found to be H161GPJ. When checked, it was found to be registered to Andrew Elphick. When it reached Andrew's family and friends, this news was immediately worrying. Andrew had not returned home the day before on August the 23rd, and no one had heard from him since. The discovery of his car with the key still in the ignition was a very alarming sign. It was located just over 30 miles from Andrew's home, and would have taken just under an hour to get there. Why was his car in Slough? The fact that the car looked to have been abandoned also caused concern, as Andrew loved his car and took an awful lot of time to look after it. He would not have willingly abandoned it. Andrew was officially listed as a missing person, and while he was an adult and had the right to walk away from his life, the circumstances in which his car was left meant that the police also had to consider that they could be looking into possible foul play. For those close to Andrew, there was no doubt. The police quickly issued missing person posters describing what Andrew looked like, in the hope that someone would see him. The main priority for police now was to try and piece together the days prior to his disappearance to try and establish if there had been anything unusual or notable that may help to locate him. The investigators were able to create quite an accurate timeline before Andrew's disappearance by speaking to his colleagues, his friends, and his housemate. By doing this, however, they also came across several worrying aspects. Andrew's movements before his disappearance were documented in the Crime Watch reconstruction that was aired in 1991. This reconstruction included information from several people close to Andrew. It's reported that on Thursday the 15th of August, 8 days before he went missing, Andrew went to work at Moss Bros as normal. One of his colleagues would later say, however, that Andrew was not behaving as he usually did, and he said that he pulled out a large wad of notes stating that it was £5,000. He then proceeded to put the money into the safe at the back of the shop. Andrew's colleague certainly remembered this, as it was strange. He did not, however, explain where this money came from or why he had it with him. The fact that Andrew had this amount of money close to the time of his disappearance was a concern for the police, and they spoke to Andrew's friends and family about this. Andrew's housemate Sasha was spoken to by police, and he explained on the Crime Watch Reconstruction that while Andrew had not discussed that particular amount of money, he had stated that if he came into a large sum of money, he would invest it in drugs, because that would make him more money. This comment surprised Sasha because Andrew didn't do drugs and didn't have anything to do with them. He liked to look after himself and would never entertain getting involved with anything like that. He explained that this was out of character. Andrew's brother later confirmed that it didn't seem as though Andrew had the money later on that week, as on the Thursday 22nd of August, the day before his disappearance, Andrew told his brother that he didn't have the £600 he had borrowed off him, but would hopefully have it soon. If Andrew had the money on that Thursday, he didn't tell his brother about it. Where had the £5,000 gone? The reconstruction went on to explain that police had established that Andrew attended a barbecue on Saturday the 17th of August, 6 days before his disappearance. He went to the event with some of his friends. At this barbecue, several people reported that Andrew was acting a little strangely. One of his friends, Kavita, told Crime Watch that he had told her that he was due to come into a large sum of money, and that he wanted to take her out for dinner when he did. When she asked where he was getting this money from, he then reportedly told her he couldn't tell her, as it was bad business. This also stuck out as odd. At the same barbecue, Andrew also spoke to several people who he had been to school with, and struck up a conversation with them. This conversation, the friends would say, quickly turned to the subject of drugs, and Andrew talked about making money from them. The friends reported that they didn't know whether he was joking about it or not, and it seemed very strange that he would be talking about them at all. That same evening, Andrew told his friend Kavita that he was going to a club in London that night. He said the club was called the SW1 Club. Andrew told Kavita that she couldn't come with him as it was members only. Despite being told that he was going to that club that evening, Andrew asked Kavita to go back to his house, and they started to fall asleep on his bed. Kavita explained on the Crime Watch Reconstruction that it was around 4 a.m. when Andrew suddenly sat up and said he needed to make a phone call. He got on the phone and Kavita explained that it sounded like he was speaking to an answer phone, as it did not last long and no one else appeared to be replying. He explained that he would speak to the person later on that day and he was sorry for not ringing them sooner. This phone call seemed to come completely out of the blue, and it was as though Andrew had remembered he had to phone someone. The police looked into the lead at the SW1 Club and tried to find out if anyone knew or had seen Andrew there. This lead, however, unfortunately did not go anywhere. The SW1 Club was quite a large and popular club in London at the time, and there would have been many people attending the venue during the weekends. This, therefore, would mean if Andrew had visited the club before, it may not be remembered by customers or staff. On Friday the 23rd of August, the day that Andrew disappeared, he had the day off work. Both Andrew's housemate Sasha and friends who went to the house that day explained that Andrew spent the day sewing up a dinner suit that he intended on wearing that weekend. The friends had 2 parties to attend that weekend, and they had made arrangements together. One of Andrew's friends who visited that day told Crime Watch that Andrew was being a little cagey about what his plans were for that Friday evening. He said that he asked him if he would be out with any women, but Andrew did not commit to an answer. The friend said he eventually agreed to one name that the friend suggested, but it didn't sound as though he was either telling the truth or wanted to divulge it. It was reported by Nick Davies in The Guardian in 1994 that Andrew's housemate Sasha said he seemed irritable that day and was waiting for a phone call. At around 8:30 that evening, Andrew left the house saying he was late for an appointment. This was the last time that anyone saw him. The missing person investigation was led by Detective Inspector John Cobbett from Surrey Police. He explained on the Crime Watch episode that while they didn't want to call Andrew's case a murder investigation in 1991, there were many things that were not adding up, and that may point to more than just a missing person. The detectives dug deep into Andrew's life before his disappearance and analysed his car for any evidence that they might find. It's reported in the Nick Davis Guardian article that the car had been left with the keys in the ignition, the sunroof open, and a filofax on the back seat. It had been left abandoned on a housing estate in Slough, and the police appealed on the Crime Watch episode for anyone that may have seen the car driving onto the estate that night, or around the time of Friday the 23rd of August. The car was forensically analysed following its discovery, and strangely it was reportedly spotless, with no fingerprints or fibres to be found. The detectives were eager to delve further into Andrew's life and wanted to establish what could have possibly caused his disappearance. The Guardian article in 1994 stated that it was discovered that Andrew had not been having much luck prior to his disappearance. Before working at Moss Bros, he had been sacked from his previous job at a clotheswear shop for borrowing their clothes and money out of the till. He had also crashed his previous car and got his new Vauxhall Nova on finance. He had his CD player stolen from his car, and also one of his credit cards had gone missing. This credit card, it was suspected by police, was being used to run up debts in local shops. It could not be established who, however, had been doing this. There were many things that were not adding up to police about Andrew's disappearance. The investigation progressed, however, when Sasha, Andrew's housemate, told police 3 years after his disappearance that he believed Andrew had got involved with some dodgy people in the months before he went missing. This, he explained, he had been too scared to tell police earlier. He reportedly explained that Andrew had become friends with 2 young men who were involved in getting rid of people's cars and belongings, and arranging for them to be sold, and then splitting the insurance money with the owners. He also stated that he believed it may have been these people who stole Andrew's CD player. It also came to light that these people may have also been involved with fiddling paperwork on Andrew's car so that he could gain finance. As told in the Guardian article, Sasha reportedly told police that these men also discussed their criminal friends and the possibility of setting up drug deals. This does seem to match with the fact that Andrew had started to talk about drugs in the time leading up to his disappearance. This information about the odd occurrences leading up to Andrew going missing raised many red flags for police, and at the time it was hoped that Andrew may have just walked away from his life. Upon discovering this worrying information, however, detectives were becoming increasingly concerned about Andrew's welfare. A reward of £5,000 was initially put up by Andrew's father for any information that could lead to Andrew's whereabouts. This was later up to £15,000. Following on from all the information that police had collated, it was reported in an article by Surrey Live that 3 men were arrested in connection with Andrew's disappearance in 1995. Police dug up a garden in Brookwood, just under 5 miles from Normandy, where Andrew lived. Nothing was found during this search, and the 3 men that had been arrested were released. The grounds for the arrest of these men is unclear. It was evident that detectives were now treating Andrew's case as a murder investigation. Andrew's case then lay dormant for another decade until 2007, when the case was reopened. For Andrew's family, the fact that the case was reopened was a welcome development, however they still felt as much pain about his disappearance as they did in 1991. Albert, Andrew's father, told the BBC, "As a family it has been difficult and painful to talk about because we have no conclusion." He said the family had faced up to the reality that he isn't coming back, and hoped that anyone who had any information would have the decency to relieve the pressure on my family. Detective Inspector Paul Monk, who was in charge of the reinvestigation at the time in 2007, stated, "We owe it to Andrew's family and all those that knew him to do all we can to explain his disappearance. His family are fully supportive of the reinvestigation despite the tragic memories it will inevitably rekindle. Whoever killed Andrew obviously knows who they are, and it's likely that others also know who they are." Despite the reinvestigation going back over forensic exhibits and interviewing those close to the case, there was no further progress made. There has been no more official information published by police since this reinvestigation. It is, however, reported on the Surrey Live website that a Freedom of Information request was submitted in 2016 in relation to Andrew's case, and it revealed some very alarming information. It's reported that Andrew had been lured to an address where he was battered around the head with a cricket bat and died from injuries sustained. It is unclear where this information came from, however, and whether this was indeed a lead that was ever followed up on. I am unsure how credible this information is, therefore, to Andrew's case, or whether it was purely speculation. It's clear that not long after Andrew's disappearance, the police began treating his missing persons case as a murder investigation. The suspicious circumstances that led up to his disappearance definitely appear to point to the fact that foul play may have been involved. Andrew's friends certainly noticed a change in his personality in the weeks leading up to his disappearance, and the sudden interest in discussing drugs point to the fact that Andrew may have been involved in something dangerous. Had he got into something he couldn't get out of? Had he perhaps witnessed something he shouldn't have done? The fact that he had a large sum of money in the week before his disappearance was out of character for Andrew, and it's concerning that this money then appeared to vanish as well. Were the two men that Andrew had been spending time with anything to do with Andrew's disappearance? According to Andrew's housemate, this was possible, as they were reportedly involved with criminals and criminal enterprises. The fact that Sasha had been too scared to come forward at the time also indicates that he believed these people shouldn't be messed with. Andrew's case is a difficult one, as although it appeared that he had been acting differently in the weeks before his disappearance, he had never wanted to be involved with either drugs or criminal activities. It seems that if his disappearance was due to criminal activity, Andrew may have got in over his head, as he has never before taken part in anything of this magnitude. Regardless of whether Andrew had got involved in something illegal, his disappearance was very sad, and unfortunately his family and friends have not been given any answers since 1991. Despite the reinvestigation, Andrew or his body have never been found. There was no trace of a struggle in Andrew's car that would point to the murder taking place there, but from the investigation it was clear that the police believe Andrew had been murdered. This case to me hinges on someone coming forward with new information, which is why police have continually appealed over the years for new leads. I really do hope that Andrew's family and friends get the closure that they deserve in this case, and I hope that in the future Andrew can finally be found. If you have any information about Andrew's disappearance, please contact Surrey Police on 101 or Crime Stoppers at 0800 555 111. Thank you for listening to today's episode. As always, thank you to everyone that continues to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen. Thank you this week to Allosaurus Rex from the US for your fantastic review. Thank you as always to all our Patreon supporters. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can get shout-outs in the show, stickers, postcards, and access to bonus episodes. The link is in the show notes. Please follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and you can also join our Facebook discussion group. If you want to suggest a case for future episodes, you can contact me on social media or email me at theunseenpod@gmail.com. Listen in to the end today for a promo from the Resolve Mysteries podcast. Resolve Mysteries looks at cases from the show Unsolved Mysteries and delves into the details of the different cases that were aired. I'm sure you will enjoy this and like to check it out. As always, thanks for listening, and until next time, I'm Caprice, and this has been Unseen.
Hi, we're Eliza,
Allison,
and Carlin.
and we're the hosts of Resolved Mysteries podcast. Our podcast follows the 80s and 90s television show Unsolved Mysteries, hosted by Robert Stack. We have a love for true crime and the unsolved.
If you don't remember Unsolved Mysteries, we forgive you, but you don't have to know to get into our show. If you like true crime stuff, ghost stuff, alien stuff, or just stories about weird shit like Bigfoot, this is your podcast.
The stories we cover range from totally ridiculous to truly heartbreaking. We do detailed research on all of the segments that Unsolved Mysteries aired, then drink some wine and give you the latest updates on every case. We talk about stories that will leave you laughing, crying, and occasionally outraged.
Resolved Mysteries podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your favorite pods. Join us and perhaps you may be able to help solve a mystery.